Hello makers, Ruth here. In this video, we'll be walking through how to create our own sun catcher. In front of me, I have a couple examples of how our sun catcher might turn out, and there are a few things I want to highlight before we get started. One is that the color isn't as important as design, right? So whether you have a super pale color like the yellow here or a cream, or whether you have a dark color like the black or the brown, you can still have a really lovely design. And because we're using tissue paper as our main material, the light can come through any color that we have. So we'll have a really great sun catcher regardless of the colors that we choose. Again, it's all about pattern, not really the color itself. I wanted to show a couple examples just to kind of get our mind going on different patterns that we can come up with for our sun catcher today. So I'm going to move these out of the way and let's get started talking about supplies. Our first supply we need, which we'll need in every project we do, are our illustrated instructions. We're going to be doing the Mandala Suncatcher. Just like all our illustrated instructions, they're laid out the same way, with our list of supplies at the top, and then the process is laid out step by step. Now, of course, I'll be guiding us through that process today in this video, but feel free to follow along. Pull this out, take notes. It's a good recipe card to refer back to whenever you want to make it again. I also say if you didn't enjoy this project, it's okay to tear it up and throw it away because sometimes that feels good and that's okay. But we're going to be following along with this today. So if you have your illustrated instructions, go ahead and pull those out and we'll set those aside. The next supply that we need from our kit is going to be our plate. Now we're using a pretty sturdy plastic plate that has some cut edges on the back. When you use a plate, having those cut edges is always a plus because it helps like the light come through in some really pretty designs, right? And so if you have a plastic plate like this, you can use it. Or if you are going to a thrift store and you find a really pretty cut glass bowl or plate, it also works for this process. I've done several little glass coasters this way too and had a lot of fun with it. We're going to be using this basic plate today, but if you do have other material that you want to use, like a cut glass bowl or plate, or things like that, feel free to bring those in and use that with this process as well. So our plate, our base, the next thing we need out of our kit is going to be our tissue paper. So at the bottom of the kit, you'll see 4 pieces of tissue paper. I'm going to be using a black, a pale purple, a pale pink, and a green. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily as important what colors you have because most of what we're doing today is focused on design and pattern. And I'll talk more about that once we get started. Now, this is regular tissue paper. It's your regular run-of-the-mill gift wrapping tissue paper. So if you want to change colors, if you want to add more color in, feel free to bring some more tissue paper in. It's the cheap stuff you can get at the dollar store, so it's not anything fancy. But go ahead and pull out your tissue paper. And then the next thing we need out of our kit is going to be our Mod Podge and our silver handled brush. Mod Podge is one of my favorite art supplies. You'll hear me talk about it a lot. Mod Podge is a magic art supply, and that's because it can be used as a sealant. It can be used as an adhesive. It can be used as a medium transfer. It has so many uses. Today, we're going to be using it as an adhesive and as a sealant. So pull out your Mod Podge, pull out your silver handle brush. I will say, just as a reminder, once you use a brush for Mod Podge, you can't use it for anything else. And so that's why that silver handle brush is added in the kit. So you can use this one and not ruin your brushes for painting. This becomes the Mod Podge brush. So go ahead and pull your Mod Podge and your silver handle brush out. Now, there are a couple things that we need that are not included in the kit. And the first one is going to be a pair of scissors. We're going to start off our time by cutting shapes out of our tissue paper. So go ahead and pull out those scissors. There are other things that you can use too. If you have X-Acto knife, paper cutter, a rotary blade, any type of blade will help you cut your shapes out. But the pair of scissors is really helpful. And then the last thing I want to talk about that's not in our kit is preparing our space. Now, you'll see me work off a piece of foil almost all the time. I feel like that's an easy way to help me contain my mess. And so that foil I'll use over and over again. But you can use other things too. If you have a disposable tablecloth, a drop cloth, newspaper, a piece of cardboard, wax paper. There's so many other supplies that we can bring in to use as our work surface. What we're doing today is not super messy, but we are using that Mod Podge. And so the accidents do happen. And it's good to protect our space just in case. It's also good to wear clothes that you don't mind getting messy or an apron. I almost always wear an apron. It's helpful. And there are disposable gloves in your kit. So if you do want to keep that Mod Podge off your hands, using the disposable gloves are a good option. Now, the Mod Podge, if it does get on your skin, it'll come off. Once it dries, you can peel it off or you can wash it off with a little soap and water. However, it doesn't always come out of clothes. So again, this is where having an apron or clothes you don't mind getting messy can be a benefit. All right. So now that we have all our supplies gathered, let's go ahead and jump in our process. If we look at our illustrated instructions, that very first step is to cut out a variety of shapes from our tissue paper. Right? So I'm going to move my tray out of the way and let's get started cutting. So I've got 4 pieces of tissue paper here. I want to cut a variety of shapes. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a different shape for each color. So let's say for my pink here, I want to cut out little leaf patterns. So what I'm going to do is just kind of fold my tissue paper up a few times. It makes the cutting out a little easier. Just folding it up. And now what I can do is cut once instead of cutting multiple times. So I can cut my leaves like this. And now I have several leaves, several pieces that I can use. So go ahead and pause the video now. Take a moment to cut your shapes out and we'll be back in just a sec. Now that we have our pieces cut out, it's time to start the gluing. We pull out our illustrated instructions. We'll see after we get all our pieces cut out, that next step is to bring the Mod Podge in. So what I'm going to do is bring in my plate and I'm going to keep it on some foil because I know I get messy. So having that work surface is a good idea. What I'm doing is putting the inside of the plate face down. So the bumpy edges are on top and that's what I'm going to be gluing to. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my Mod Podge and my silver handled brush and just go ahead and open that lid. We're going to be using a little bit of Mod Podge today. And so you can use your brush directly in your Mod Podge container. I like to pour it into the lid here. It just makes it a little easier for me. So I've got a little cap full of my Mod Podge. That first step before we start putting our pieces in is to think about the pattern that we want to use. You can go just any direction you want and just put a variety of shapes around. But what I'm going to do today is kind of start in the center and work my way out. This can be a very meditative process. It can feel really good to work in a circle like that. And so that's where I'm going to start today. So I'm going to start in my center here and then just kind of build my Suncatcher out layer by layer. So I'm going to start off by adding some glue to my surface here. We're going to be doing that Mod Podge pretty consistently through our making process today, adding a layer of Mod Podge, adding our tissue paper, and then putting some more Mod Podge on top. So we're going to be going through a lot of it. So it would be good to have everything prepped and ready to go. I'm going to take my brush and just dip it in my Mod Podge. We don't need a huge amount. I'm just going to kind of start covering part of my surface. I'm going to do a little bit at a time, so I'm not covering my whole surface, but I'm going to fill in kind of a big circle here. It doesn't have to be a thick coat of Mod Podge. You can see I'm just kind of spreading it thin. And you'll notice as you're doing this that the Mod Podge is going on kind of cloudy. That's good. It doesn't need to be clear, but it will dry clear. So I want kind of a thin layer across my surface. So I've got some glue here, my Mod Podge here. I'm going to start off by placing my shapes. Now, because I'm starting in the center, I'm going to start off with a circle one. Now, for every Mod Podge or every tissue piece that you put down, it's good to go ahead and dip your brush in the Mod Podge and just kind of cover it with that Mod Podge. What we're doing is sandwiching that tissue paper between the Mod Podge. That first layer is holding it down. It's acting as the adhesive. And that second layer that we're putting on top will not only hold the piece still, secure it, but it also prepares it for layering, right? So I'm going to start off my process doing some layering here. I'm going to take my tissue paper and again, starting from the center, just kind of laying those pieces out little bit by little bit. Now, you don't have to do the shape that I'm doing. You are more than welcome to, or just kind of go your own direction too. Let your mind wander and be creative with the design that you're coming up with. So I started off, I put my purple dot down, my first piece down. I added Mod Podge on top. Then I've laid my next layer down, and I'm going to take my Mod Podge again and just gently tap. Okay? So I'm covering it in the Mod Podge, but I'm also kind of pressing it down. I'm not brushing it like I would a painting. I'm kind of tapping, right? Just tapping it down because I want every surface, every part to be covered in the Mod Podge, right? And so what you'll notice, and I'll go ahead and lift it up so hopefully you can see a little easier, that Mod Podge is covering. We're building layer by layer. And the thing to keep in mind is every piece of tissue paper we put down, we want to add a layer of Mod Podge. So I'm going to keep adding more pieces. I'm building just like a little flower piece here. I know that I have big fingers and sometimes it's hard to pick up those tiny pieces. So one thing that does help when I'm picking up tiny pieces or tissue paper pieces is to just get my finger a little wet, and it helps pick up those pieces too. You can see I'm just layering that tissue paper on top of itself and covering it in Mod Podge every time. And just as a reminder, it doesn't have to be a thick layer, and we're not painting across like we would a painting, right? We're just kind of tapping the tissue paper, doing a little bit of glue, a little bit of that Mod Podge at a time, and just kind of tapping. So now I've got a good first layer. You can still see that the Mod Podge is cloudy, so that means it's still wet. Once it starts going clear, we need to add another layer. So I've started off by creating a really nice pattern here. I'm going to add some more of these purple dots. And you see what I'm doing is just kind of adding little bit by little bit, filling in those spaces. The nice thing about using tissue paper is that the tissue paper is a little bit translucent. And so when you're layering that tissue paper on top of itself, right, you get on top of other tissue paper, not on top of itself, on top of other tissue paper, you're getting some really nice blending, right, of color, color mixing. So I'm just kind of laying my pieces down and then covering them in that Mod Podge again. And you can see it doesn't have to be super smooth, super fancy. We're just covering those layers up. So I'm going to go again and start adding more tissue paper. You can see I'm just kind of setting it on top. And I'm making sure that everywhere I put that tissue paper, there's a layer of Mod Podge underneath. Right? And so when I put that tissue paper on top, I can come right after that and add another layer of that Mod Podge. So I've started by creating a center dot and then gradually kind of laying those pieces as I go further and further out. So my next step, you see I got to the end of where the Mod Podge is. I'm going to add another layer of Mod Podge around this outside. Again, we want to make sure that the Mod Podge has a layer on the bottom and a layer on the top. So I'm just kind of filling in. And again, I'm not painting like I would for a painting. I'm just kind of tapping, right? I want to make sure that the Mod Podge goes into each of those little crevices that are cut. Because if the Mod Podge goes in there, that means I can press the tissue paper into it. And I want to make sure that I get a lot of really nice color for the light to come through. So I want to see as much of the tissue paper as I can. So I'm just making sure, just kind of pressing in. and making sure all those spaces are covered. Again, it's going to go on cloudy. That Mod Podge is going to go on cloudy and it's going to dry clear. So we won't see any of that. Now you may be like me, and as you're working, you'll see that you kind of run low on some of the Mod Podge. Just take a moment to pour more into that cap. It's a little easier for me to move the little thing, the little cap, than it is to move the bottle around quite a bit. It's easier to hold in my hand, as it were. But do whatever feels comfortable for you. And again, I'm just kind of adding a layer of that Mod Podge, and I want to make sure that it's getting covered. That plate is getting covered so that my tissue paper will stick. Right? Now, you may find that some troubleshooting is needed. As you're working on your piece, let's say I'm doing this little piece right here. I want to lay it down. Right? So I'm going to go in the center here, lay it down, and then I'm going to take my Mod Podge and press on top. Let's say that yours got bent up like this. So once you put it down, it kind of like crunched up on itself. That's okay. You can just take your brush and like gradually open it up and move it to the place you want it. And those wrinkles aren't bad, right? You may find that as you're working, you may have a tear like I have here. That's also okay. You can just take your brush and move those pieces back together. Okay? And that glue that we're working with, that Mod Podge, helps hold everything still, so it's not as noticeable, right? You can also take it off and do another one. Tissue paper is a supply that we find in a lot of places, so it's okay to be generous with the amount of tissue paper that we put on our mandala today, our stained glass Suncatcher. So I'm just kind of adding those pieces. Mm. And you may find that as you're doing it, that you can get some of the tissue paper may start sticking to you, and that's okay. Just take your time with it. There's no rush. And again, we're just kind of gradually building this mandala type shape. And I'm just kind of layering things up. And then as I lay down my tissue paper, I'm going to put some of that Mod Podge on top. And again, we're not painting with it. We're not doing those paint strokes, right? Not doing that. We're just tapping that Mod Podge on top of it. And we're also tapping in a way that those tissue paper pieces are getting stuck inside those little crevices, right? So the tapping is generally the best way to do that. And you see, I'm not being super careful with it. I'm just kind of tapping with that glue as I go around that Mod Podge. Now, it doesn't have to be a super thick covering, right? A little covering works just as well. I'm just going to kind of go through and do another layer of these lovely little petals. Now, you may find, like me, that you have several light colors here, and that's okay. Light colors are nice. You may find that you have some darker colors. Darker colors also work well. I have found that when I was making several different examples, that sometimes that black or that brown looks really nice and really does add to your piece. And when you have those light colors, like the pinks and purples, the yellows, the creams, those look so good when we start stacking them and layering them. You get some really lovely color blends, which is nice. So there hasn't been one that I've seen that I've been like, oh, that's kind of rough. All of them look so good. And it's because we're playing around with light and color, right? And it looks good. Any color looks good. So I've got my little bits of color here, my tissue paper, and I'm just kind of sandwiching everything in that Mod Podge, putting that Mod Podge on top. And you can see it's not taking a long time to do all those pieces. I'm just letting myself kind of take my time with it, go slowly. add that layer of Mod Podge, add that tissue paper, add another layer of Mod Podge. Now I'm going to kind of come through and add another layer of color. But what I just noticed is when I picked up my square here, I noticed that I need some Mod Podge on the ends. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is add a little more Mod Podge around the ends. We don't want to add a whole bunch of Mod Podge in the beginning, cover the whole plate, and then start from the center. And that's because that Mod Podge will dry on us. So we want to make sure that it's still cloudy when we're coming to put the pieces on it, those tissue paper pieces. And again, if you have a paper that tears, know that that's okay. You can just as easily, move it back together with your brush or add another layer on top of it. When you start doing layers and layers, especially if you have those lighter colors, if you start doing layers and layers, you do get some really lovely mixing and transition of color. So I'm going around and adding that Mod Podge around that last rim, the edge of my piece. And now I'm going to start by adding another layer. And you see, we're just kind of taking our time with it, starting in the center and just gradually working our way out. I'm going to start adding some of my square pieces here. And again, I just want to invite us to take our time with it. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because I think any color, any way we lay it is going to look nice, right? Because it's color, right? We're just stacking color. So what I'm doing is just kind of adding my little squares. And you can see when I started placing my squares, I started on one side and then went to the opposite side. And that's one thing that I found that helps me kind of space it well when I'm doing a layer. And that's something we have to do. But then it gives me a little gap. So now I can go through, add a little more Mod Podge. Now I can go through and tap that Mod Podge on top of each of those colors. And again, just as a reminder, we want to make sure that we're sandwiching the tissue paper with that Mod Podge. You see, I'm being generous with my Mod Podge. I'm not being stingy with the amount I put on, but we don't need a whole lot of Mod Podge. Just a thin coat works well. And you can see that my plate is still pretty cloudy. So the glue is still, the Mod Podge is still wet. Right? So I'm just adding, again, not painting and brush strokes. We're more likely to kind of tear our tissue paper when we do those brush strokes. Right? So we want to just kind of tap. We're tapping for two reasons. One is to prevent the tears, or as much of the tears as we can. And the other reason is we're pressing it into that kind of cut design that's on the plate. All right. So I've got one layer of green. I'm going to go through and do another layer. And I'm just going to go to the opposite and just press those pieces in. If you don't have a design that you're following along with, that's okay. Sometimes it's just putting those pieces down as it comes to you. It's not really about making a design. It's just seeing what colors show up in the process. That's good too. So now that I have that next layer in there, I'm again going to add some of that Mod Podge. Just adding that little bit by little bit. Tapping to make sure that that Mod Podge gets in every crevice and that that tissue paper goes into those little cracks and crevices, those cut pieces, the design, the texture. And while we're working on this, I just want to mention a couple things. One, we're gluing on the outside. We're doing the cut glass part. So one of the things that I've used this project for that is not its original intention, or originally intended to be used, as a plant tray. And so using this plastic plate here, I can put the tissue paper on the bottom, and when I flip it over, I can put the potted plant on top, and it uses and use it as a way to catch water. So you can make these really pretty like sun catchers for other purposes as well. We can be creative with it. Because we're using it on the cut glass side, you can use it as a charger for a dinner, going under the plate that you're eating off of. But I think the nicest way to use this is really in the light. You're able to see how the sun is coming through and just pretty colors. It just looks nice in the window. All right, so I'm going to go through now and I'm going to do my last layer here. And I'm just going to put my little black triangles down. I have to say that I have found that using the black is quite fun, especially here where I've got all these light colors and then this one dark color. There's something really nice about the black being used here. Uh, So I'm just kind of going through and putting my pieces, tapping them down, deciding where I want them to be. And again, we've got that layer of Mod Podge underneath. And then we're going to put some of that Mod Podge on top. Right? Sandwiching it. So again, we're using our Mod Podge as an adhesive because we're gluing down our pieces, and we're using it as a sealant. So it's going to protect our tissue paper, protect our piece. And I will say, the more layers of Mod Podge you add, the more protected your piece is going to be. So if it's a piece that you want to keep like on your porch, I'd recommend doing more layers of that Mod Podge. If it's a piece that you're hanging it just inside on a windowsill, then that's perfect. Only one layer really is all you need. But it's good to think about where you want this piece to be. And so I'm just kind of taking my time. Again, I'm tapping. I'm not painting brush strokes, but I'm tapping because I want those tissue papers to get in those little crevices. And you can see I'm kind of messy with it. I'm not worried about getting it on my work surface here. So we've got this really nice look piece. Now it's going to take a little while to dry, but I think we've got some really nice color that's showing up here, right? So once it dries, we can go back and start thinking about how we want to add a handle on, or a hanger, some way to hang it up. I'm going to move this out of the way and walk through a couple ways that we can add a hanger to our sun catcher. So for example, I have my sun catcher here. This one's dry. It'll take about a day or two for it to dry completely. Depending on the weather, it changes the drying time. So it could be anywhere from a few hours to a couple days. But you'll know it's dry because you can touch it and it's really hard. And also, that cloudy color that we saw is gone and everything is dried clear. So you can really see the colors come through. Right? So let's talk about ways to hang it. So you could just leave it like this and set it in the window. I think that is nice. But if you want to create a hanger for it, something that you can add a hook to, one of the easiest ways that I have done is to take a piece of embroidery floss or twine or yarn. I've got a little piece here. I've got a little piece here. What I'm going to do is just kind of lay it on my piece. Right. So I've got I've got that little hanger, like the little loop here. So I've taken my embroidery floss, I've folded it in half, right? And I've just got a little piece. This is probably more than I need, but I've got just a little piece here. I'm going to lay that embroidery floss down. I've still got my loop. And what I'm going to do is take my Mod Podge. When we're doing something like embroidery floss like this, we can use Mod Podge and it works really well. One of the tips that I've found is that when you do this, when you create your loop, that it's good to go ahead and just create a knot at the end, right? That knot is going to give that Mod Podge something really nice to hold on to, right? And so I'm just going to create a little knot here. Right? So I've got my loop and my knot. Now you can do this with other material too. I talked about, I'm doing embroidery floss and I talked about yarn or twine. Ribbon also works. Um, and you can also do things like the pop top of a soda can. That also works. But what we'll do is we'll take our Mod Podge and you can use a hot glue gun if you have it. What I'm going to do is get some Mod Podge on my brush here and I'm just going to kind of add it to my spot. Put that cording on top and then add a little more Mod Podge to glue that down. Now, the nice thing is that when it dries, you won't see this at all. I'm using black because that's what I had on hand. But like I said, you can use all sorts of colors. If you want to do ribbon, if you want to do a braided embroidery cord, a floss, if you want to do yarn, a strip of fabric, a soda can pop top, all those things work really well. But by sandwiching it in that Mod Podge, it's holding and securing that little loop so I can hang it up. Like I said, you can use a super glue also works. You can use a piece of like a hot glue gun also works. There's lots of things that you can use to kind of create this, but that's the basic premise is you're adding that layer of glue, Mod Podge, sticking that ribbon or cording in, and then putting more on top and then letting that dry. You can see for mine, I've got the hook so somewhat far down, and that's so when I hang it up, I don't have the cording lifting above my plate. So that's why that cording is where I put it. So that was my thinking for that. Well, I'm super excited to see how our sun catchers have turned out. Please feel free to send us a picture at our kits at Mather email, KITS at mather.com. If you have any questions, please reach out. We're always happy to answer questions, and we are always excited to see what everyone's working on. Happy making, everyone. We'll see you soon.